Thank you for having me, and I'm really glad to be here. This is a very exciting conference. And I would like to tell first a couple of words about my background. So in the last decade or so, I was dealing with early cinema, Hungarian early cinema. In fact, I just published a monograph entitled From the Fairground to Cinema, the Emergence of Visual Mass Culture in Hungary from 1896 to 1914. And I think that early cinema is a very fertile ground for intermediate research, especially because moving images in that period, they are in a transitional phase. There are not dominant or conventional uses of moving images. Everything is in experimenting. They are looking for different ways, possible ways to use moving images. And there is a very fertile discourse about that in the era. So in my book, I was looking for the conditions through which the technology of moving image, the technology to produce the illusion of movement, is transformed into a medium with specific social uses and into an art form in its own right. Okay, so, and I was looking for how these conditions of this transformation from a technology into a medium and into an art form were negotiated, mainly in the newspapers and in the trade journals. And people speculated on different uses of moving images. So, for example, they thought that moving images can be used as a reproduction technology to reproduce theater for around the globe and distribute it around the globe. Or it could be a medium, a mass medium, a means of mass communication, democratizing the masses. So there were all these sorts of utopian hopes attached to this medium. And then there was the thought that it can become an art form in its own right. And I think that in this debate, in this Hungarian debate, unfolding in trade papers and journals, there was a genre which brought a decisive turn and defined for all what moving images are for. And this genre is the genre of the Kinema-Sketch. And this is a very peculiar genre because it combines theater and cinema in a way that I am not familiar that it was so popular in other countries. But in Hungary, at the beginning of the 10s and 20s, they made more than 150 Kinema-Sketches, which were basically plays alternately performed on stage and projected through moving images. So the play consisted of alternating scenes consisting of 3 parts, 4 parts, or 6 parts, and it combined these two different media. So of course in early cinema we have many ways to combine theater and cinema, and the most usual ones were the plays, the performances in which moving images were incorporated as a spectacle, as a back projection, which brings about the most spectacular moment of the performance and maybe replaces stage machinery and enhances the visual attraction of the performance. But in the Kinema-Sketch, there was this very specific threat of the plays that cinema and theater were equal partners because they told the same story. Through the theatrical scenes and the cinematic scenes, one story was told. And one of the contemporaries formulates this in the following way: the moving images carry the action forward, so that those not are only illustration or decoration, a back projection of what is happening on the stage. What happens between the acts in the theater is played out before the audience's eyes in forms of moving images, of course. The theater and the moving image appear to the audience as equal parties complementing each other. So there is this complementary relationship between them. So I would like to show you one example in particular, how this worked, because even in this era of media convergence of ours, I cannot fully imagine how this transition from stage to screen could work and not be really distantiating or unfamiliar. So unfortunately, the sources documenting the actual performances are really scarce. So we have scripts, we have photos documenting perhaps the shooting, and we have a lot of texts dealing and analyzing Kinema-Sketches. Like the first truly film theoretical texts in Hungary appear in relation discussing the Kinema-Sketch, which is really phenomenal for me. So let me show you one concrete example, and that is The Rich Man's Coat by Ferenc Molnár, who was a really famous playwright at the time. And this is a Kinema-Sketch consisting of 3 parts. It begins on stage, it is followed on screen, and the end is resolved on stage again. So here we have the script in detail, including the description of the moving images incorporated into the play. And we have a poster and a couple of photos, stills from the shooting, and just a very short sequence of moving images. And this is the only moving image sequence surviving to this day, made for Kinema-Sketches especially. So The Rich Man's Coat is about, there are 3 characters, and this is a photo of the stage scene. The rich man enters the coffee house, and we find out very shortly that he's attracted, he has an attraction for the cashier. But the waiter is also in love with the cashier. So there follows an altercation between the 2 men out of jealousy. They are mutually abusing each other and verbally confronting each other all the time. And one cause for this confrontation is the rich man's coat, because the rich man doesn't want to hang it. He wants to keep it next to him on a seat. And then the waiter says that if the coat sits on the chair, it should be a guest, and it should order and consume, you know, like in a coffee house. So the rich man, because he is rich, he will order drinks and everything in the name of the coat and drink a lot. And there is this game of the personification of the coat on stage, in which everyone participates. And for example, the waiter addresses the coat as your honor, and the rich man becomes the secretary of the coat. So they all participate in this game, the personification of the coat culminates in a joint singing to the audience, in which the cashier confesses that he is in love with the waiter, but the money are not so bad, so she hesitates between the 2 men. So we find out about her motivations too. But the rich man gets drunk and falls asleep. But before falling asleep, he says, and this is the introduction of the moving image part, of course, he said, "If I were some kind of eccentric man, I would try to take this gallant coat out into the so-called society. What a career it would make in a few days. How people would run after it. How they would respect it. No one would notice that he has no head, no legs. No one would notice that he has nothing, just a bunch of banknotes in his pockets." And with this, of course, music begins, and moving image sequences are projected. I believe on the curtain, maybe, but I'm not sure of this. And we have the description of the moving images in the script, included in the script. So we have the title, the intertitles of the sequences, and this detailed description of what happens in the moving images. It's about the coat, that Mr. Coat goes for a walk and he visits all the famous places in Budapest. So these are familiar and very well-known places for the people who are watching the Kinema-Sketches. Drives out, spends a lot of money, drinks, gets into affairs, and also goes to Von Petit, which is a famous restaurant, and the Coat meets the famous theatrical stars of the era, Sári Fedek and Ede Újházi. And they have this conversation. We have a short moving image sequence about that. And then Mr. Coat goes to the Kinema-Sketch at the Apollo Theater, which is the exact theater where Kinema-Sketches were shown, exhibited. And in the front of the theater, a big crowd waits for Mr. Coat, and no one cares for the rich man and the waiter and the cashier who is accompanying the Coat. So he's very well respected because of his money, of course. And the last moving image sequence is about, again, the rich man falling asleep. So we have a dream in a dream. The rich man again falls asleep, and in the time, the Coat steals the cashier from the rich man, seduces the cashier, and when the rich man wakes up in the dream, he punishes the Coat for this. He bangs him and basically executes the Coat. So that is the end of the moving images. And then we have, I just want to show you a couple of stills from which are surviving in journals. Okay, so I will maybe. Okay, is this better? Okay, so these are stills from the shooting. On the left, you have these theatrical stars, Sári Fedek and Ede Újházi, how they meet the Coat and how they bow before him. And then we have a scene in Városliget and the meeting with the crowd before the Apollo Theater. So these are the main stills surviving. And we have just a short moving image sequence, how these theatrical stars arrive by automobile and they meet the Coat. So these are persons which were really familiar for everyone watching the Kinema-Sketch. Yes, and then we have the third stage part. And in this, we have like a resolution of the whole conflict and a narrative in which the rich man renounces his love for the cashier because he learned the lesson given by the Coat. Because the Coat makes exactly what he does, you know, in the dream, in the moving image sequence dream, that is a mise en abîme of what it happens in the coffee house, which is staged in the theatrical scene. So let's see what is the role of the moving images in this Kinema-Sketch particularly. On the one hand, the film depicts the rich man's dream, that is a projection of inner life. And at the beginning of the dream, the rich man and the other characters are enjoying the public respectability bought with money by the Coat. The dream quickly turns into a nightmare, however, when the doppelganger turns against the rich man. So the poetic justice recalls the arbitrary punchline of slapstick cinema too. Beside animating the inanimate, moving images fulfill desires related to social power and respectability, but also tell a fable, a parable, which brings the power of the symbolic gaze to the fore. By including actual people and places of the capital, moving images contribute to the cinematic construction of the social gaze, in glorifying Mr. Coat as a respected gentleman, but also when they turn away in horror by his emptiness. There is also a scene in which bystanders observe that this is not a man, this is only a ghost of a man, and they are horrified by it. So, and then there are other very interesting Kinema-Sketches too. I won't deal with those in short of time. But let's see how Kinema-Sketches are cases for researching intermediality. I think that there are three ways of intermediate relations involved in the Kinema-Sketch. First of all, because the Kinema-Sketch tells one story, a single story, and it has to unify the cinematic narration and theatrical narration. And it has to find a space, an intermediate space, even if it's in the imagination of the spectators, where these medial interactions take place. And second, there is this transition. There is a very interesting transition from stage to screen and vice versa, which are clear cases of crossing medial boundaries and drawing attention, of course, of medial differences. And these are also narratively motivated, because we have when we are changing the stage for screen, there is always a change in the state of consciousness of the characters. For example, they dream, they have hallucinations, they have visions, they are jealous, they are somehow the moving images explore this inner life of the characters who are embodied by real life actors on the stage. And in a third way, many plays incorporate self-reflexive elements about the theater or the cinema. So many times characters rehearse theatrical plots. They introduce theatrical plots into the way, and they stage different characters. Or there is this case when Mr. Code goes to the theater, in the same theater the Kinema-Sketch is actually shown. So it's I think the intermediality of the Kinema-Sketches can be grouped in two different aspects. So on the one hand, we have an affective intermediality, by which I mean what the contemporaries also said about the Kinema-Sketches, that Kinema-Sketches involve a perceptual confusion. It causes a fatigue of the nervous system, they said, because of the changes, because it involves different spectatorial positions. I mean, differences in size, alternation of speech and absence of speech, these transitions from stage to screen and vice versa. Also, characters have a double identity, which is really interesting for me, because they are embodied by live actors on the stage, and they have this other identity explored in moving images. They were called at the time shadow people. They were just shadows on the moving images. And this reminds me actually of our identities, how our identity is split between our digital identity and our offline identity. And there are many conflicts between those identities, and there is a need for mediation of those. So these concern the affective intermediality, and there is also a reflexive one. I also hinted at that previously, that there is a constant reflection of medial differences. If you want to experience the Kinema-Sketch, you have to pay attention to these different differences of media, comparing and contrasting them. And there is also a function of the theatrical scene to teach audiences how moving images work. You've seen how moving images are prepared by characters, how they are announced, and how after all, in the third sequence, third theatrical scene, they are discussed. So there is a return to the discussion, and the mediality of theater and cinema is discussed on the scene too. So where does all this leave us? Are cinema and theater friends, foes, or rivals? And it is really interesting because in the contemporary text, even in the same text, these positions always change, and it is undecided. So it is a big debate about this. If they are equal partners, if they're complementary, they have a complementary relation, they are contrasting or even incompatible. And I think in the long run, the debate is set, especially by the case of the Kinema-Sketch, that these two media have a division of labor between them. So they are different. They have medium-specific features, and because of that, they do different things. The cinema can bring about the subjectivity of the characters, can deepen the inner life of the characters, which would be really awkward if the characters themselves would stage that on the theatrical stage, like telling the audience how they feel. That is strange and artificial. But if that is included in moving images, it becomes motivated. So they have this division of labor. Theater contextualizes and explains the moving image effect. And also the Kinema-Sketch is a very important transitional phase between early cinema, the cinema of abstractions, if you will, and later narrative cinema, the narrative feature film cinema in which are centered on stories with characters with an inner life, psychologically motivated main characters. And for me, Mr. Coat is the first truly film character in Hungarian cinema, a fictional film character, which also glorifies the power of cinema to animate even inanimate objects. Thank you for attention.